Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hello Hot Flash, where we teach you how to control the change. Our guest today is Ann Marie McQueen. Ann Marie, thank you so much for being here.
So much for having me. This is amazing.
It is. So, you guys, I did not hit record early enough because the best part of the conversation has happened, but we'll try to recreate it so we can bring you into the fold. I've been cyber stalking Ann Marie a little bit, and I was fortunate enough to have a guest last week who knew her. So she was gracious enough to be a guest today. So I'm going to introduce her and then we will get started. Ann Marie is a journalist with 30 years of experience, much of it focusing on health and wellness. She launched HotFlashInc, a platform designed to seek the truth and inform, inspire, and entertain people through perimenopause, menopause, and midlife. The community has grown to 30,000 women around the world. Tune into her weekly Substack podcast and social media. And I'm super excited to have her here with me today. Ann Marie, let's get started. Yeah, tell us a little bit about your background.
I was born. Okay, no,
I was born by the river.
I'm from London, Ontario, Canada, and I always wanted to be a journalist. And I became a journalist. I got a poli-sci degree, but I went into journalism after that. And I spent half my career in Canada, and I've spent half of it in the Middle East, which is something I could not have foreseen. And when I was in Canada, I worked through the small town sort of circuit that you have to do and started covering a lot of healthcare back then, writing about things that I'm still hearing about today, nursing shortages and doctor shortages and waiting times for ambulances. And I remember writing all about, the first holistic center that did massages. And I remember them saying, this is going to be the biggest boom. And me thinking, well, I don't know. And this was back in, the late 90s. And then I became I went to Ottawa, the capital of Canada, became a columnist. I wrote a lot about wellness there, and I really started to specialize and always became very interested in the allopathic traditional medical side and the integrative functional naturopathic woo-woo, depends where you're coming from side. My mom was a nurse, so she was very much in the traditional, but my mom was also very sick. I lost her when I was 27 and she was 53, the age I am now. And she had cancer and it was so fast. But before that, she was sick. She had a lot of health problems, fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue and endometriosis and migraines and bladder infections and all the things that we hear about today. And I was too young and wrapped up to help her. And now I think that has, looking back, driven me to be, very interested in this area. Anyway, and then in 2008, I just moved to the Middle East because they were launching a newspaper. And I thought, I want to live abroad. And it sounds like it was an easy decision. And it was kind of, even though now it seems crazy. And here I am.
Yeah.
Here I am. And then I had helped launch a newspaper, worked there for 9 years, and then started freelancing, and then started thinking of, when I realized I was in perimenopause, I just couldn't find the information that I wanted for myself. And it took me so many years to realize I was in perimenopause. And I can tell you about that if you want to know, but just the same old story of going from doctor to doctor and thinking you were dying. And then when I finally realized I was in perimenopause, okay, I want to find out about this. Just couldn't find the information I wanted, and just eventually decided to do it myself and started it in the pandemic. So here we are.
Here we are. I want to hear that story because I think I wish in 2017 I had a podcast or someone to listen to that I wouldn't think that I was crazy, because my drama caused me to start having anxiety attacks. So I was in the hospital emergency room, I don't know, once or twice per month, thinking I was going to die with just having an anxiety attack. I do want to hear your story so other people will know they're not going crazy, and then we can help support them.
Okay, so, I'd say around 40, 41, I started having just a lot of weird stuff happen. And it's always like life is there and it can be explained a bit by that, right? We had a really serious illness in my family that's continued to this day. I had a relationship that was very troubled, a live-in relationship. So you got those things and you got work stress. So, you feel like you're losing it, but also you could say, well, this is big and that is big. Right. But, it's only in looking back that I can realize it was very dramatic. I remember crawling into the empty bathtub in our house one night, just being like, I remember buying a bucket of popcorn we were just talking about popcorn, and sitting in the back of a taxi in Abu Dhabi and just eating it because I was so panic stricken that just the chewing of the popcorn was just like calming me down. Like I was losing it. I started just being ripped with sheets of fear. And this went on for years, where I would just be sitting and then, oh God. And it's almost like a voice would just come and say something horrible has happened. Or sometimes there wouldn't be anything attached to it, but just a sheet of fear would rip through me. I started having terrible nightmares that I was dying. I had these nightmares that I was taking a pill to keep me alive. And when I woke up in the nightmare, I hadn't taken the pill for a couple of days. So I woke up thinking, I haven't taken the pill. And I mean, this just came out of the blue. I would be scrambling on my bedside table looking for a pill. I would be on my hands and knees. I sometimes would be out of bed, like looking for the pill. And there's no pill. Obviously, you can't take a pill to stop you from dying. I mean, maybe there's a few, but I also developed this crazy fear of flying. I had to start drinking Jack Daniels to get on and I fly a lot. Like I fly these long haul flights back to Canada. I would have to, in boy, do you notice how many people are scared of flying when you are scared of flying, because the bars are packed with people also drinking, so they can get on the plane. But, all these things started happening, and it just really, really, I was really struggling. And then physical stuff too, like just feeling like I had just tingling on my body, weird feelings in my head, terrible chest pain, chest palpitations. I was in the ER for chest pain. I was always at the doctor. I would sit at work and think, well, I think I'm going to fall out of my chair. Like, I think I'm going to fall out of my chair I think I'm having an aneurysm. Well, at least there are people around me. And when I die, I'll be on the floor. Like, I was having those thoughts all the time. I think I'm dying. And I would say to people, like, do you ever get random tinkling on your scalp? Or do you get random? And of course, everyone's like, no. And then you're scared because they're saying it. And so much of this, I just went on and on. And what I ended up having, I think I went to 12 doctors. I did have a really acute situation where all my eyelashes fell out.
Oh, wow.
And that was very scary to me and very scary to other people. And so I went to a trichologist, like a doctor who looks at hair. And it's funny. He's a funny guy because he did all these tests. He said, you're okay, but I think you need to get checked out and deal with your stress. And if you need to break up with your boyfriend, break up with your boyfriend. And I left his office and I was like, he said, if you need to bin the boyfriend. And I did end up binning my boyfriend. So that was really funny. That guy really helped me. It was like that movie with Jim Carrey. I don't know what that movie is, when he opens the door outside of his world that he's in.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I can't think of the name, but I know what you're talking about. Yes.
But it was a bit like that. Like, I walked out of this guy's office who's a hair doctor who basically gave me what a therapist would never say to you. And then I entered therapy. Because I was the eyelashes, someone did say to me, the body knocks before it breaks down the door. It whispers to you before. So I had stuff going on, like genuine stuff. I had adverse childhood experiences I had stuff I was stuffing down. I wasn't, I would drink too much. I would work too much. I would work out too much. I had all that stuff that needed to be dealt with that I think a lot of people have in midlife. Right. And then I had all the perimenopause stuff on top of it. And I now know I had that dropping progesterone that just completely screws up our ability to have a proper stress response. So I now know that's what was going on. Like, I didn't have the hormone and probably if someone had given me progesterone at that time, I probably would have been a lot better. But I felt like a lot of times, like, I didn't have any skin. I was crazy. And it was a real brawl until I skipped a period, because that whole time my periods were regular. They changed within the period. Right. And this is what I wanted, because I think, Stephanie, there's also a lot of, yes, I didn't know about it. And yes, all the doctors I saw, including the naturopath who treated me when my eyelashes fell out, no one mentioned perimenopause, yes. But clearly I knew about it. I knew menopause was coming, but I didn't want to be in it. So I didn't even want to, I don't even know. Right. And when your periods are regular, but maybe change within the period, it's just very easy to say, oh, well, that's nothing. The fourth day is the strong day, and the day I have the cramps, not the first day, but I'm still regular. So, that's a long way off. So
yeah.
When I missed a period, then I was like, oh, and then when I started learning about it, and it took a couple of years for me to now say, okay, all that craziness, 41, 42, 43, that really tracks with what everyone says, what everyone talks about.
Yeah. What would you tell young women about perimenopause?
Well, I just think there's such negative fear mongering going on right now, and so much of what I call fudding, like instilling fear, uncertainty, and doubt in people. And I never want to do that. What I would tell them is, you're entering a time years before menopause. You don't know how long it will be. It's a period of hormonal imbalance. You become more vulnerable. You can't take your health for granted, and you can't keep doing all the things that you used to be doing, because what everyone does is double down. So, when I would feel that crazy anxiety, I would make these crazy workout schedules, and I'm talking like spinning classes, then Bikram yoga. And I would say 5 nights a week, I'll do that. And then at the end of the week, I'll feel fine, or I'm just going to go have a couple drinks. That's what I've always done. I'm going to work so hard and get all this work done. I'm not going to pay any attention to those feelings and emotions. I think it's a huge opportunity in your 30s to really get your metabolic health in order, your hormonal health in order, and to work on those things that everyone knows and seems to be talking about more now. Dealing with your trauma, dealing with the unhealthy habits you have, dealing with feeling your emotions and not trying to avoid them. And then you can enter, and I think it could probably be pretty okay, or at least you're aware. So if you start having a sudden fear of flying or driving over bridges, I also had that, other people have that, you start having these sheets of fear ripping through you, you're not like, there's something really wrong with me. And then I think that's all I want people to know. And it doesn't have to be a horrible time. I think it's horrible because we didn't know about it and we didn't know what was happening. And look, once you know, it's better just knowing.
Right.
And then you can figure out how to help it. If someone had just said progesterone to me, I don't know what I would have said. I would have fixed things for sure.
Right. Tell me what's wrong. Give me a solution. Let me move on. For folks that are just listening to the audio part, I'm nodding my head, especially when I'm thinking back to when you just said you sat in the office, thought you were having an aneurysm, and then thought, oh, at least people are around. I kid you not, stroke was mine because my aunt had an aneurysm. Another aunt, both my mom's sisters had a stroke. So I would sit there sometime and think, all right, I'm here. My team members are here. They know I'm kind of sick, so they will find me quick. Maybe they'll get me to the doctor. And that's all part of the psychology that goes along with being in perimenopause that I don't think we talk enough about. So I appreciate you sharing that. It's not to scare the young folks who are listening. It's just to make you aware that this happens and you're not going crazy.
It does feel like you're in the bit of a prison in your mind, because you can't really let people know how bad it is. I feel like I couldn't vocalize what was even going on. Like, even the nightmares were just like, what is going on with me? This is so crazy. So yeah, I think being and feeling alone in it is bad, but hopefully if you can head into it with awareness, you can nip that in the bud. It's the same as if you were aware of mental health challenges, or if you started sliding into a depression and you had people around you who were watching and you were aware, you probably wouldn't maybe let it go.
Right. I know. That's why we have to keep talking about it. And everyone's saying, I don't know if it's me or maybe you're feeling this way too. It's like everyone is talking about menopause now, maybe because I'm in it, but there's so much out there. What bothers you about this current climate around menopause, these conversations that are happening?
Oh my gosh, two of all day. It's funny because I'm a very positive person and looking on the positive side of life, but I could go crazy on what bothers me, because this is a normal, natural process that we were meant to go through. Right. You can never tell me that Mother Nature, whoever brought us here and created these magical orchestras that are our bodies, made it so that we weren't supposed to live past 50. And just because we do, we enter a disease state that needs to be corrected. So it really bothers me when I hear people speaking very incorrectly that we only just started living past 50. And that's why we started having menopause, because that's absolutely not true. Like, yes, our life expectancy was much lower. And it meant that, a lot of us, like on the average, we might have only lived to 50, but generally people were dying young as children. Women were dying in childbirth. There were always people who lived to 70 to 80. There have always been women who've gone through menopause. This narrative is so incorrect, and I hear it all the time from people who should know better. And it's damaging because it says it shouldn't be happening.
Mhm.
And it should be, and it has always been happening. It's a lot harder for us now. It's a lot more complicated because our world is a lot more complicated. But it 100% is not an accident of nature. And that is one of the most ignorant things I hear. And then sort of coming out of that is just this straight line that's drawn from menopause disease, and it's being shortened and shortened and shortened. So it's just menopause disease.
Yes.
And so many people are, I'm not going to criticize social media. I love the way everything has come out of the hands of the media, and now everyone can do their thing.
Right.
But menopause does not equal disease. It equals a vulnerability in a time where we need to pay attention and sort of regroup and get our act together and realize we can't take our metabolic health for granted, and our cardiac health for granted, and our brain health for granted, and our bone health for granted. But we can regroup and hopefully get everything together and become happy, healthy old ladies. The fear that is being instilled in people, I think, to sell products is what bothers me the most. And it's always taught, I hesitate to talk about hormone therapy because it's such a hot button topic, but I fully, hormone therapy is endorsed by all the guiding bodies for treating menopause symptoms and also for the prevention of osteoporosis, but it is not endorsed by any guiding bodies to prevent dementia or cardiovascular disease. And there is some evidence that it does that. There is some other evidence that shows that it does. It's just not settled yet. And way too many people are putting a study on green screen, cherry picking a study and putting it on green screen and suggesting that you need to be on hormone therapy or you're basically really robbing yourself of the chance to live a long time and not get a disease. And I just don't think that the randomized controlled studies on comparing like a healthy woman who does all the right things lifestyle wise and a healthy woman who does all the lifestyle things lifestyle wise and goes on hormone therapy have been done. And until they've been done, I don't want to hear your fear mongering. And these are doctors, and I think they should know better. And I really don't like that. And it's people who have conflicts of interest. When you have private clinics, when you have a company that sells hormone therapy, these are not the people that I'm going to get that information from. And I have done 87 episodes of my podcast, and I've spoken to really balanced, measured experts. And I just really believe that this is a time for careful, cautious engagement and informing yourself and figuring out all the risks and benefits, and not hype and not fear. This is not a way to make a decision about that. I fully support hormone therapy, and I'm about to look at it myself. Yeah, but those are the things that really bother me. There's no place for that. There's just no place. And takedowns and arguing, making fun of certain treatments that women like, the arguments about supplements, the people who are against supplements, people who are against the Dutch test, this, that, I just think that stuff's all crazy. I in my career, there's room for all of it. We don't know half of what we need to know about menopause and perimenopause. Really, truly. Like when you look at the medical studies, there's been 94,000 studies on menopause, not even 6,000 studies on perimenopause. There are 1.1 million studies about pregnancy when you look in the database, the PubMed database. So that's 1 out of 10 studies on menopause compared to pregnancy. And all of us go through menopause. Mm-hmm. And not all of us go through pregnancy. So that just gives you an example of how little we know. So, So you asked, Stephanie.
I appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that you just said you're thinking about hormone therapy, but I want to say before we got on, before getting to that point, you're doing all of the work. Do you know what I mean? We talked about the way that you've changed eating habits, not drinking anymore, the exercise and not over exercising. So you're doing all the work. When you do all the work and hormone therapy becomes the next step, then that makes sense. We also talked about taking medication so you don't have to do all of the work. That becomes a totally different story. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there. Like if someone's listening, I'm like, no, Ann Marie's doing all the work. We talked about it before we started the podcast, started recording.
I am very concerned. So just to say one more thing, very few people talk about this. Mm-hmm. And I am concerned. And a few very smart people that I've spoken to, but not very many people. Mm-hmm. I am concerned about people who go on hormone therapy and continue drinking daily, and people who go on hormone therapy and are overweight, because drinking daily and being overweight are risk factors for a whole bunch of diseases. And hormone therapy, modern hormone therapy is, it's pretty safe. It really is. But if you're going to raise your risk factors and then add a risk factor on top of that. That concerns me. And I think in the future, we might see a lot more discussion about drinking and hormone therapy, but there's a pretty big lobby for alcohol.
So I've also heard age plays a role in it as well. Like you don't want to be like in your 70s starting HRT kind of thing like that. Have you heard that as well?
Yeah, there's the guiding bodies like the Menopause Society, which used to be the North American Menopause Society, and its most recent guidelines. They speak about the window of opportunity. The evidence is really pointing to it's most effective when taken as close as possible after menopause within 10 years. And, I heard a podcast the other day where this really smart doctor was talking, and she said, we aren't tricking Mother Nature. We're just trying to trick Mother Nature in a way that doesn't cause any harm. And this is when I say I see fear mongering and I see some irresponsible people online. There are doctors saying you can take hormone therapy as long as you want. And it's like, okay, you say that, that's fine. And I'm not a woman who's on hormone therapy and it saved my life and having to face the decision of going off of it. But I just want people to understand that the guiding bodies, they're talking about the window of opportunity. So when you're getting out of that window, or I know someone who went on it pretty late, like 8 or 9 years after, but she's very aware of it. You know what I mean? She's very conscious of the fact that she's very close to the end of the window. She's watching, there's nothing wrong with that. That's very important. Like watch the hype.
That's with anything, any medication. So that's super important. So I love the name of your business, HotFlashInc. I think that's how
I didn't know about your podcast, by the way, when I started it. I did not know.
What have you changed your mind about since launching HotFlashInc? And tell us a little bit about it as well.
Basically, I started with a newsletter and I just sent out a newsletter every week. And then after a while, I launched a podcast because a company, Become Clothing, approached me and said, if you launch a podcast, we'll sponsor it. So they were the sponsor for the first couple of years. So that was really cool to get a sponsor to start the podcast. I just grew all the social media around it. I've moved my newsletter to Substack, which is where sort of all the journalists and lots of people putting out newsletters are. We did Andrea Donsky, a mutual friend of ours. We did a summit together called the Menopause Shift Summit last year. And we're going to be doing it again in January. And I'm going to be doing some speaking and workshops over here in the Middle East. And I just basically want to keep it as a place that just is the truth, the place where you find the true truth, because there's just so much hype and there's so many people with agendas and there's narratives. And I just want to cut all through that. And I want to keep on top of the latest research. And one thing I did change my mind on is hormone therapy. I will say I'm a pretty, I don't like exogenous interventions. The older I've gotten, like I used to, but I really, over the years have just gotten very wary of like, well, if I take this, what's the side effect? If I take this, what is it doing? And the more I learn about the things we take, the more I realize that it's kind of better to take nothing. And this really goes not in every case, obviously, and in medication situations, but that's how I approached this conversation was, well, you probably don't need hormone therapy. I think hormone therapy might be dangerous. Like, I think it might be this or that. And, like anything else, when you get down into it, you learn. And that is one thing where now I'm like, okay, I really can see some benefits. Like I mentioned, progesterone. I think, in our summit, we talked to a lot of longevity specialists and they were all talking about estrogen. And it's very hard to know, but I do think there's probably some benefits for longevity if it's used in a certain way. I'll love to see the data about cardiovascular health and dementia. And I'm also really interested in testosterone lately because I'm pretty sure I have ADHD. I've done a couple of online tests and I'm seeking a proper diagnosis, but I'm interested in testosterone for executive function and some other things. So I'm really much more open to it now. At the same time, I don't really want to get a prescription for anything if I don't have to. I just don't like, whether it's the zombie apocalypse, I don't want to have to break into a pharmacy. I don't know. Life is easier, when you don't have to. We're running out of everything. My phone's running out. My earphones are running out. My morning coffee's running out, the pods, like you're always running out of stuff. I just don't want to add more to my life than I'm running out of. That's just really one of the simplest reasons why I will go to the wall, not to have one more thing that I'll be like, oh, I gotta go.
Toilet paper.
Yeah. Yeah. And it bothers me a little bit. I'm going to bring up one more thing that bothers me is there's a tone that if you are cautious about hormone therapy, if you're just not into it, you're kind of dumb. Like
Mm.
you're kind of a dummy. You're just not seeing it. You're just not quite with it. And I really don't like that tone. It's sort of a mean tone. And it reminds me of when all the cool kids were doing something and I wasn't doing it and how you get treated. And I'm not down with it. So
Yeah.
zombie apocalypse.
What have been some surprising or insightful trends that you've uncovered since writing for Hot Flash Inc?
Well, I'm really interested in some of the really forward thinking things. Like it's really interesting to see people talking about things like microdosing mushrooms and using cannabis and all the different therapies that are evolving. Like, there is research showing that our adverse childhood experiences can worsen menopause. Well, to me, it's no surprise because if you have things in your subconscious that are popping up into your conscious and you're shoving them down, like that's going to make everything worse. Mm-hmm. And one of the really cool things is that link and knowing that there's that link. And then all the new ways of therapy that are cropping up in how to deal with that. Like I've had talk therapy, but I just got sick of it. And I felt like my therapist was putting me in a box and it's really expensive. And so I just stopped it and I did a lot of self-work and there's so many workshops and things you can do. And now there's all sorts of other therapy, like somatic therapy. So the thinking is that some of this trauma is trapped in your body. And I'm in the middle of a course with the Workout Witch right now in August. I'm doing the hips. And apparently around week 3, I'm going to have some breakthrough. But they're just these little movements, like little rocking movements. And you can just feel the peace and calm coming in your body. So this isn't even really even about perimenopause or menopause. It's just, there's so much available to us. And a lot of it's not very expensive. And then I'm interested in some of the discussions about, do you have to have menopause? Do you even have to have menopause? Like, can you delay menopause? Is there a way that you can take a piece of your young, healthy ovary and implant it later? Like there's all these sorts of, like the end of menopause is a definite area of research. I personally am so happy. I'm 3 weeks away from a year without my period. I'm so excited. It's great. Like, it's like if I had my period now, I would cry all day. But, there is a real race on, if you can call it that, like a menopause race to sort of end menopause, right? To just like delay it and then we can be young forever. I'm very intrigued by that research. Like I love watching it and I love how everyone goes crazy about it and picks sides, but I'll be really excited to watch where that goes. Because if that's what people want to do, and we have the technology and the science that helps us do it. I mean, I think the benefits of that really sort of moonshot research always comes down to us anyway. So, they always find out other things. So I'm really interested in that too.
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever do like, can you get pregnant? Oh my God, what if I like what if I'm 65 and can get pregnant? Or I think going through this menopause transition gives you so much wisdom. You start to understand your body, how to treat your body. You work in relationships better. I've learned when to talk and when not to talk. Like there's so much that I've gained from transitioning through menopause. Even my mindset on how I raise my adult children and how I'm interacting with my grandchild now. I honestly believe that 2 years of pain and suffering through those symptoms informed how I'm operating now. So I don't think I would ever want to give up this time of life. It's amazing to me. Who's had their period? Like, to be able to do that stuff.
Well, this is what bothers me a lot is it just gets focused on the negative part and it's not all negative. Like, I call it like a hero's journey because there's many dark nights of the soul. I've had this last year, it has really kicked my butt. Like, and the last 10, and this is I've been in the most epic perimenopause of all time. I had to do it to come here now. And yeah, it would have been nice if I'd had some help and intervention and not been so lost. But the way I feel, like the way I'm feeling, the way I'm learning to see people and back away from them when there's maybe not so good for me. And I would have just gone charging in before. Like my intuition and listening to myself and realizing that it's just a very calm voice that speaks. It doesn't even speak really. It's just like a calm knowing of like, like I went to New York for the launch of the Peri Journal. I've done a lot of stuff for Peri. I just knew I wanted to go there. I just knew I wanted to go. It seemed crazy to fly to New York, but I was going to Canada anyway. There was someone I wanted to get in touch with in New York. I called her. We had a coffee. someone just said, you have to talk to her. Like you need to talk to her. We were sitting in Bryant Park having a coffee, and I was like, this was, so they say that when you go through midlife, like the veil between sort of you and whatever other world there is, or your knowing it becomes much thinner. And that is this is an amazing, amazing experience. I wouldn't give it up for anything. And it's exponential growth. So if anyone feels like they're trying to change, like I was always self-improvement and taking courses and trying, it just feels like it sort of starts to gallop. I was quite ill over the last year, and I stopped drinking because I had a leaky gut. And I do feel that having that break from alcohol for that long really helped me rise and grow faster, because I do feel that a lot of us use alcohol, even if we don't think we are. I do think it numbs and blunts life a little bit. And so everything I've gone through makes sense. And it's beautiful. Like, it is beautiful right now.
I know, I agree with that. For the folks that are like us, that like to read on all of the new research, and where are you finding your information, and what makes you decide to write about a particular thing that's going on?
Okay, so I really like to keep an eye on new studies. I pay a lot of attention to meta-analysis. That's when when a body will come out, or a person will go look at a whole bunch of studies and then make a conclusion about it. And I'm always very aware, because if it's a conclusion that people like, then they will embrace it. And if it's a conclusion that they don't like, then they'll use all the delegitimizing tactics that people have used for me in journalism whenever a story they don't like all my whole life, right? So if there's, recently there was a study that came out, and dementia and hormone therapy studies, they're sort of it's very mixed evidence. And some of it has to do with the fact that they're comparing synthetic hormones to bioidentical hormones, apples to oranges, as people say. But there was a study that came out and said it can increase your risk of dementia. Well, this is the problem. Some say it can reduce, some say it can. The way people talked about that study, well, this study isn't done properly. It's only an observational study. It's blah, blah, blah. When the study comes out that they like, they won't have any of those criticisms. It'll be just fine. And so I am very aware of that. So that's why I like meta-analysis. And then I'm also aware of how those are embraced. So in February, I had someone on the HotFlashInc podcast who was on a committee of cardiologists who reviewed all the literature to see if hormone therapy prevents cardiovascular disease. That is a prevailing narrative. That is a belief. That is something that's accepted. No, they said, no, it doesn't. And if you listen to me in the podcast, I'm just literally like stopping her all the time and saying, I'm sorry, I just have to double check with you. You're saying it doesn't. And then I had so many doctors writing to me saying, I just can't believe it though. Like, it must be maybe, and I don't know what to say, but that's where we are at right now. I do think the synthetic bioidentical thing plays a factor, but meta-analysis is, to me, and randomized controls trials are the things that I pay attention to. And there's a lot of sort of really nonsense studies that go on, so I try not to. And then I have a body of really reasonable experts. If I speak to someone on my podcast and I think, wow, you're really reasonable, like you're a doctor, but you totally aren't making fun of the functional side. You wouldn't make fun of a chiropractor. I mean, every doctor that makes fun of a chiropractor, I don't like to listen to them anymore, because then sometimes I'll have them on my expert panel. So I have an expert panel on my website, but it's just people that I have spoken to multiple times, and I think they're so reasonable and they're humble. Mm-hmm. And so, I have people like Lara Bryden, who's a naturopathic doctor and an author in New Zealand. She's written a book called Hormone Repair Manual, Period Repair Manual. She's writing a book on metabolism. Anise Mukherjee is an endocrinologist in the UK who is so smart, wrote The Complete Guide to Menopause. I have a bunch of experts like that on my website at HotFlashInc.com, where there's people I trust. To me, like really ego-driven, bombastic takedowns, these are not physicians that I trust for their expert opinion. Because I just think just because you speak the loudest doesn't mean you have the more to say. And I heard that on a TV show on Apple last night called Hijack. I didn't make this. Jim, what do you say? Just because you speak the loudest doesn't mean you have what you have to say is better.
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
I agree with that. I have gone into a doctor's office and they're like, I can only tell you what I learned, or it has to be science-based. They will not be open to anything else. So I had some eczema going on, and in my mind, I'm like, I'm not sure if it's eczema or something else. So I do need to go to a physician. But I also know that if it is eczema, I'm working on a gut health. I'm not taking a steroid. So when he told me, like within 3 minutes of meeting me, he had me on 2 different steroids, and I'm like, oh, buddy, like you know nothing about everything else that's going on, stress level and so forth. I'm right there with you. Like if a physician says that they do not love a chiropractor or do not believe in chiropractics or any functional medicine, I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't know. We need to keep
You
talking.
see this all the time. And I just think there's a fundamental misunderstanding. And you can't really blame people in the medical system because this is the way they're raised when they go to school and they're brought up. We're a bunch of parts and we're a bunch of symptoms and we're treating symptoms and not treating the root cause. And that's actually the truth of a lot of medicine as we know it. And that's why all this, we have the other side that is looking for the root cause, that is doing, really intricate, like granular testing to see what's going on. And then you have doctors on social media making fun of that and saying it's unnecessary. And I think that it's up to us to just sort of realize, like, you kind of need a team. I know this stuff can get expensive, but you can't always get what you want from the other side. And if you're going to go into the doctor or just want to leave with a pill or two pills, then that's what will happen with you. But I think one of the opportunities of this time is that you become responsible for your own health. Like, you become the person who's deciding. You can start to realize that your doctor has this window, and it's not that you know more than him, but you know more about you, right? So I'd love to see everyone have a spreadsheet of all their scores and be able to monitor that themselves rather than have that be floating around in the ether. Because if I had that, that's another thing. If you're in your 30s or before perimenopause, like, get all your base testing and just keep it in a spreadsheet. Like, you would do that. Hopefully, I wish I did with my finances, but finances, all your markers. And then you were the project manager of your own health. That's,
And we need our doctors. I go to the doctor. I want 100%. I want a cardiologist, oncologist, dermatologist, whatever the case is. But I know that there's also other steps often that we can take. And when I went through my 2-year struggle, that's exactly what I did. As a matter of fact, most of the doctors just rolled their eyes. I'm like, well, I need to see the lab work. I need to physically have it. And when I started pulling all those things together, got 2 doctors that started to like me because I was there enough to talk to each other, that was one of the ways that I would start to uncover exactly what was wrong with me. They actually sat down and had lunch together and talked about me. I'm like, my heart was so great. I felt great about it. But they were like, we have to figure this out. We've never had anyone like this. So you're exactly right. Keep your markers. Make sure you know what's going on. Ask for copies. Look year over year at your, my white blood cell count is always kind of funky, but they'll tell you what's going on this year and not look what has happened over the past 3 to 5 years. You need to educate yourself.
Yeah, that's really, really important. Yeah.
So this is so awesome. I'm like, oh, this is going to be like 20 minutes. And I'm like, do you have another appointment? Because I have 2 more quick questions for you. So what advice do you have for women who are struggling now? That's one of them.
So if you are struggling now, I would say give yourself grace. Mm-hmm. This will not last forever. You're going to get through it. Stop trying to get back to where you were. Like, everyone wants to get back to some mythical place at maybe when they were 37, were on a morning when everything was together.
Oh, one day.
Yeah. And you're going somewhere different and it's not worse. Mm-hmm. Like, I always say about HotFlashInc, this is going somewhere good, because look at women who are 60. You just have to look. There's so many happy women who just don't care, and they're just free, and you can see it. And so, not to listen to all the negativity, like, to keep your eye ahead and just give yourself grace and take it one step at a time, because you can't unfold it all at once. You can't address it all at once. Like, deal with the first thing that you can deal with, that's the most pressing in your mind, and then go from there, and just give yourself time. It's not going to last forever, and you're going to be so happy when you're done.
I love that. Ann Marie, what's coming up that folks need to know about?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm going to be launching office hours through my Substack. So if you are a paid subscriber, it's like $8 a month or $80 a year, $7, $80 a year. If you do that, we're going to have office hours. So once a month, I'll talk with everyone for an hour. You can ask me anything. I'm not a medical expert, obviously, but I'll tell you what I'm seeing and hearing. And if if there's a question that I can't answer, I'll go and speak to experts and come back. And it's just a way to sort of have a way for us to talk about what's going on. So that is one new thing I'm doing, my office hours. And I'm working on a book, but it's going to be a little bit of time.
Awesome. I'll have to have you back after I read the book. So this will be awesome. Make sure you keep me connected with that. How can folks find you?
Okay, so it's HotFlashInc everywhere. HotFlashInc.com, HotFlashInc on Substack. The HotFlashInc podcast is everywhere you find podcasts, and all across social media. I have a YouTube channel I'm working on that's just up and coming, but TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter are my main things.
Right.
And on lovely podcasts like yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being a guest and spending so much time with me today. This was awesome. I love when I can talk with someone that like gets my, my geekiness when it comes to menopause and food and nutrition and so forth. So I've enjoyed our time together.
Me too. And congrats for sorting yourself out, because that takes a lot of patience and work and maturity.
Thank you. Thank you. And hey, everyone, thank you so much for listening to Hello Hot Flash, where we help you control the midlife change. Make sure to check out the show notes where we will include, I'm going to have to change that sentence because I always say, where we will include links to subjects we covered today. Again, thank you guys so much for joining us, and here's to your health.